Today I'm going to talk about eating disorders. Did you know that eating disorders are an addiction? Probably the worst addiction of all. Alcoholics stop drinking altogether to recover. Drug addicts stop taking drugs altogether to recover. But food addicts have to deal with food every day, and it's a hard thing to do. I'm going to talk primarily about anorexia, bulimia, and overeating as food addictions and give you some backgrounds on all three of those eating disorders. And the reason I know a little bit about these eating disorders is because I suffer from one of them, and most people would never guess. Anorexia is the first eating disorder I want to talk about. Anorexics are addicted to the illusion of control and the feeling of euphoria from being empty. Anorexics are a little different with the food addiction because it comes more towards the end. The addiction is more about control and being empty and being in control of being empty. Anorexics have an obsessive desire to be thin and believe that if they are thinner, their life will be better. They're preoccupied with food, weight, and eating, like I said. So there is that point of eating, and their addiction is of not eating what they really want. So they control it, they restrict. Anorexics can't tell when they're hungry. They have the same gastric activity that happens to a normal person when they feel hungry, you know, the hunger pains and all of that. But they don't feel them, and they don't feel them because they're too busy being euphoric about being empty. So that gives them a high where they don't feel the hunger pains. They don't feel any of that. The next eating disorder I'm going to talk about is bulimia. Bulimia is a food addiction and a purging addiction. Bulimics binge eat and then participate in some extreme measure to counteract their binging, primarily purging. They vomit, they restrict, they overexercise, they take laxatives, diuretics, sometimes they even inject steroids in order to burn fat. They'll do whatever to counteract the binge. And they do binge so they can eventually purge in whatever way, you know, usually vomiting. And that purge is the addiction that comes with the food addiction that bulimics have. Bulimics don't stand out. They're not like anorexics where you can, when it's extreme, you can tell. Bulimics are usually of normal weight or a little bit underweight, or a little bit overweight, but they really don't stand out. And a lot of that information I got from this book, Anatomy of a Food Addiction, and it's by Anne Catherine. And I really recommend it to anyone who has an eating disorder or has a family member who has an eating disorder, because it gives a lot of insight into what happens with a food addiction. Bulimics usually suffer from body dysmorphia, and body dysmorphia is not seeing your body as it is. As anorexics do, where they look in the mirror and no matter how tiny they are and how thin, they still see fat somewhere. Bulimics have dysmorphia. There's some they just can't see their body the way it is. There's something that they see as damaged. A shocking percentage of bulimics have been victimized. I believe it's 66% of bulimics have been victimized in some way. Sexually abused, raped, verbally abused. And that's what the bulimia is really about. It's taking in so they can get rid of those feelings that they have inside because they were victimized. It's a way to express their feelings. Since they can't lash out at the person who's done them the damage, they lash out at themselves by binging and purging. The next eating disorder is overeaters, and again, it's a food addict. The overeater's perspective is one of lack and limitation, not necessarily of food. Lack and limitation when it comes to attention, affection, trust, safety, honesty, and that comes from early childhood, meaning they have not had the best childhood, they've been ignored, they haven't had a lot of affection. Overeaters suffer from severe long-term deprivation, as I stated. It's part of the reason they eat. They eat and eat and eat to fill themselves. So they substitute what they missed out or what they feel they don't get with food. Food addictions have, food addicts have sensitivities to certain foods, which should be avoided. And those foods are refined carbohydrates, processed sugar, and processed flour. In other words, white sugar and white flour. Or the sugar has dozens of different names, and those need to be avoided. The only sugar really should be that which comes in the food naturally, as it does in fruits. What all eating disorders have in common, and these are the personality traits of anyone who has an eating disorder. The very first one, and the one that does the most damage, is always putting others first. Eating disordered people have a tendency to put others first. They want to fix everybody, hoping that that person will reach back and help fix them. We don't feel or show anger or sadness, and sometimes both. We are always put together and organized, and people who see us say that person has it all under control, and the turmoil is all inside. We always want to keep everyone happy, even if it hurts us. We're very responsible. We don't make mistakes. We're perfectionists. We don't like to trouble others because we don't feel that we deserve the attention. We're very brave. When we're out in public, we try very hard to be invisible. Nobody sees us. And we like keeping our feelings under control at all times. So any feelings that are shown are usually by ourselves in the bathroom. And that's from experience. That came from Anorexics and Bulimics Anonymous. Also a great book, which I recommend for the same reasons I recommend Anatomy of a Food Addiction. I also wanted to show this because treatment of eating disorders based on them being a food addiction is almost exactly the same as treatment of alcoholism or drug addiction. So I have the Alcoholics Anonymous Big Book. And if we look through that big book and we replace the word alcohol for food, it fits right in, and it's all the same premise. I hope you've gotten a better understanding of eating disorders. Anorexia is not about food, really, and it's not about being vain or wanting to look better. It's a real illness, and it's very difficult to cure. Most people usually fall back into it after several times after a period of being in remission. So I hope you get something out of this and you learn a little bit more, and you're able to help anyone who you know who suffers from an eating disorder. Thank you.